It's time once again for Wellness Wednesday, and full disclosure, I am not super well today. I had a flare-up of one of my health conditions. I won't get into details, but if you think my face looks puffy, it is. If I zone out, if I drop a word here or there, that's why. I'm telling you in advance. I'm pushing through, but thank God I pre-recorded for yesterday. Ugh. Anyway, we're talking about gaslighting today. Not because of me. Well, I had a couple of experiences this week, but the news stories that inspired this were two of them. Before we get into that, if you like this kind of content, if you like this sort of mental health related content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. I've been getting a lot of great feedback about these segments, which is nice. Positivity on YouTube. What? But the two stories that made me decide to talk about gaslighting this week were, of course, the Harry and Meghan thing, but also this Google story of Google HR reportedly advised mental health leave in response to complaints of racist or sexist behavior. Yeah, there's nothing deeper than that. They just apparently, whenever an employee made a complaint about racism or sexism, they suggest they take mental health leave. Somebody would be like, well, racism and sexism make you feel bad, so that's nice of them. No, the people making the complaints weren't saying they were in mental health crisis. They were annoyed, or the workplace behavior was inappropriate. It is not an A to B response to, oh, somebody was racist to you. Take a mental health break. That doesn't solve the racism. That's sending the message of, you're too sensitive. You imagined it. You're not well. Textbook gaslighting. It's terrible. I know the big trendy thing in tech and video games right now is burnout leave. I've been talking to a few people about it, that instead of, setting a more sane schedule or reducing work hours across the board so that people don't get burned out, now burnout leave is a basically no questions asked thing at the better run companies. But Google being Google, of course, they took a good thing that is necessary sometimes and used it to gaslight their employees. And getting into the definition of gaslighting, this is a tricky one. I don't like, because accusations of gaslighting can be used to gaslight people. This is a really, really tricky thing, because any tactic used by an abuser they tend to hide in plain sight, because it's making you question reality. It's making you question your own perception of reality without cause. Like you're actually getting it right and someone's convincing you didn't. Because we get into these elements of perception, this is a very, very tricky thing. And someone falsely accusing somebody of gaslighting can be used as a form of gaslighting, because it can be used to invalidate legitimate complaints. And that's where I come to the Harry and Meghan thing. Because I haven't heard anybody else talk about this, but the fact that they did the dirty trick of, before the Harry and Meghan interview aired, they released the story that we're investigating accusations that Meghan bullied people. And then, of course, it comes out in the interview that, Meghan was in a very bad way, mental health wise, like in crisis. And they said, too bad you can't go to the hospital. You can't get a doctor. It would look bad. And there's an example of, okay, she probably did flip out on some of her staff. because she was having a mental health crisis and they wouldn't let her get treatment. There's a shining example of how they use something that's factual but leave out a significant detail, causing Megan to look like the bad guy instead of Megan being at the end of her rope, not being able to get help, just doing her best and having a breakdown on staff. And that doesn't mean her staff should just suck it up. It means that when you actually look at who is the most accountable, she reached out, she tried to ask for help, and they said no. And we'll find out. This will roil in the press for a while now, but at this point we have no reason not to believe Meghan Markle, because, well, she's not Meghan Markle anymore. She's what do they go by? Windsor Mountbatten Windsor, something like that. But there's no reason not to believe Meghan right now. She seemed very credible. She seemed to be remembering when she was speaking. And granted, as the palace said, recollections and perceptions can differ. Recollections and perceptions differing and outright gaslighting are very different things. And what lends credibility to the fact that the palace is the firm, the institution that is the monarchy instead of the individual people? Well, the fact that when they wanted to make Meghan look bad, there was going to be an inquiry into her bullying. But now that she's alleging, some pretty nasty racism and, refusing her on, first of all, leaving the house, second of all, the mental health breakdown that all the restrictions and the weirdness and the media beating up on her, resulted in refusing her treatment for that. Oh, now that that's out, now they're going to handle it privately as a family. So when it was convenient for them to make her look bad, oh no, inquiry. Now, equally serious accusations, family matter. That double standard is a pretty sure sign of gaslighting. Gaslighters use chaos and inconsistency, and confusion and projection to control a situation. They keep everybody so off balance that they can control the chaos. The British tabloid press is a shining example of that. It's bad. It's bad, and because it's an incredibly manipulative behavior, no number of laws in the world can totally solve that problem. If somebody is an abusive manipulator, they will get away with some stuff. And that's what makes, and they are very good at rallying other people to their completely manipulative cause. And I know a lot of people who watch this channel are on the receiving end, have been on the receiving end of precisely that sort of thing. And they couldn't defend themselves, and everybody thought they were a piece of junk. I've been on the receiving end of this. I mean, God, back in the day, the one article for Polygon, I was being told I was a liar and a shill and this and that, and I'd misled people, and then Polygon was saying, if you're going to respond to those people, untag us. No, seriously, that's what Polygon did. Big defenders of women, right? Big defenders of women. We support women in gaming, all that stuff. Yeah, if you're going to respond, untag us. No support, no indication of, yeah, gee, we held this peace for 2-3 weeks. I think it was only 2-3 weeks. It might have been longer. So the timeline of things now seems weird, but you were not trying to pull a fast one, right? They could have backed me up on that. They chose not to. They're just treated me like total disposable garbage, which is why I don't believe for a second that they actually support women at that company, based on my own personal experience. Yay, Women's History Month. That's my own personal history. But there's a lot of gaslighting. There's a lot of gaslighting, not just in gaming, but in business in general, in arts in general, anywhere where there's a lot of attention that is going to attract narcissists and broken people. Now, the problem is, obviously, if someone's like a malignant narcissist, if someone's just, and I'm not talking like, antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. I'm talking about sort of the colloquial term narcissist, somebody who's really full of themselves and enjoys manipulating people. There's a big difference between somebody who's doing this stuff because they are just a narcissist and people who either they themselves have been gaslit their entire lives, notably by parents, or an ex intimate partner, and it's somebody close enough to them for long enough to do a real number on them. Though I believe that nobody can do this to a person like parents can. And a lot of people are gaslit by their parents. So because somebody has been gaslit their entire life, they don't know it's gaslighting. And that's a tough one. When someone's just a narcissist and you get the sense they're doing it deliberately and they revel in it and they delight in it, it's like, well, they're an asshole. That's easy to square away, right? But somebody who has just sort of been trained that this is what people who care about each other do. You tell someone when they're being stupid. You tell someone when they're being too sensitive because that's helping them. That's a very difficult problem because the person doesn't realize, they don't realize they're damaging other people because they don't realize how they've been damaged. And that's what I want to talk about with gaslighting. I don't want to get into any more, because we have to sort of, it's that prove harm, right? Not that it's merely annoying. Gaslighting is deeply psychologically harmful because it makes people question reality, right? And this isn't the same as a healthy level of, am I remembering that right? Memory is imperfect, right? It's imperfect for everyone. No one has the right to insist they have an absolutely perfect memory, even in this day of like recordings and deepfakes and all that stuff. Two people can remember a conversation differently because of perception. One thing can mean one thing to party A and mean a totally different thing to party B. And not to be confused with Cardi B. But people may not remember the conversation the same way because people remember what they heard, not what the person actually said. That's not gaslighting. That's just, you got to communicate and work it out and really listen to each other. If this is someone you trust and they're going, what? There's a big difference between someone going, I don't remember that at all, and someone going, that did not happen. It didn't happen. People who are deliberate gaslighters or people who have serious psychological problems will deny a conversation happen, will deny an event happen, even when there's evidence to prove them that it did. Because mom or dad did that to them. Because that's just, they are taught, if you're feeling hurt, don't admit you made a mistake because that invalidates any right you would have to be hurt. Relationships become a zero-sum game for people that have been raised in chronic gaslighting environments. And that doesn't mean they're bad people, right? It means they've been taught some really faulty life skills. And I'm sure you're not surprised that there are a lot of people with very faulty life skills in an introvert-heavy industry like video games. I've met far fewer obvious and deliberate narcissists in games than radio. Narcissists in radio, it seems so strange, right? But there are a lot of like real narcissists in radio. But television, film, a lot of narcissists, a lot of very sweet people too, but a lot of narcissists, right? And there are different types of narcissists. Not all of them are the scary, Harvey Weinstein, Joss Whedon kind of narcissists. There are different flavors. There are far fewer of those in games. There are a lot more people of the kind that have been picked on their whole lives, they're in a constant state of invalidating their own emotions, and so they end up invalidating other people's emotions. There's a lot of that in video games, just by the nature of by virtue of the sheer amount of damage that people bring to the table. And that makes project management really, really hard. Because in any video game project, this is not an exaggeration. This is experience. You can have a staff of 12 and have 15 mental health conditions you have to deal with because multiple people have more than one. That becomes a real management challenge because what one employee needs for this condition, it flies completely in the face of what another person needs for this condition, right? Now, stability across the board is usually better for all conditions, right? Problem is then you've got somebody in there with like ADHD and ADHD, when it's out of control, people are wrecking balls and they jump, they're all around, they toss something out, they do something again. They've got all this manic energy. It feels great for them. But anybody with any sort of trauma condition or any mental health condition that needs stability, they're like, and it's a real problem. And too often, we've all seen the horror stories with these small indie game studios where everybody ended up hating each other and like backbiting each other to the press, sometimes posthumously, meaning somebody died and they're still shit talking them to the media. And those are circumstances to me that look like everybody was so wounded that they couldn't stop and go. There were a whole bunch of wounded warriors, no managers. Nobody going, all right, this is no one's fault. Sometimes it is someone's fault, but a lot of the time it's no one's fault. You've got one set of needs and you've got another set of needs and they're not being managed. They're working at odds with each other. The problem is if you've got somebody in a very, very vulnerable state, any attempt to get them to see another side registers as an attack. And that's when things get really fun. Because when you have people crunching and not sleeping and not eating properly and feeling guilty and self-conscious because they're falling further and further and further behind, you have a perfect storm where someone's having a mental health crisis isn't capable of seeing other version, like other people's sides of things, not other versions of reality, other sides of the same reality, They don't want to hear it, and they've got, I'm ill, I need to be supported, and, they're lashing out, and they don't realize they're lashing out because they're just desperate for any port in the storm. This is a very common problem in game studios. Game studios are currently still not very good at addressing this common problem. And I think a lot of the really sensational headlines that end up in the press, There's probably an element of that. I mean, some people, there are still narcissists and there are still assholes. Look at those guys at Ubisoft. I mean, the thing that's funny about the Ubisoft situation is there's a couple guys involved in that whole thing that everybody who knew anything about what was going on in that company, like, oh, that guy's gone, things are going to get better. People know who the real assholes are. You know, it's the people that are chugging along, and all of a sudden they become a completely different person. That's when things get so difficult. And why am I talking about this regarding gaslighting? Well, because gaslighting is a trendy term right now. It's a very real thing. It happens. But because it's trendy, accusations of gaslighting become tactics a gaslighter uses to gaslight. And you're like, and this is the problem with gaslighting. Out of context, out of the greater pattern of behavior, out of the awareness that somebody started here with their self-esteem and self-image and now they're like down here because of this relationship and the chronic invalidation. It seems like perfectly innocuous statements. Similarly, some people have been so beaten down, they have been so gaslit in the past that they see legitimate attempts to empathize and support as cynical and picking on them. And this becomes a real issue with validation of emotions. You know, the textbook stuff you're taught about how to validate that someone is having a bad time. Some people in gaming are so badly gaslit that they think you're demeaning them by even bringing up emotion. And that becomes a real problem because sometimes you can totally validate how someone's feeling, totally see how they got the impression they did, but you can't confirm that things happened exactly the way they did because they didn't. They misheard somebody. There's documented evidence that they got the order of something wrong or that someone did not say what they're claiming. And then you get somebody yelling, "You're gaslighting me," when you're not. And this is the problem with this term. It's a real thing. But identifying it is very complicated. And here's my way of determining gaslighting from an honest misunderstanding. People are do as I say, not as I do, for one. They don't follow their own rules. A person who... You ever have that person who keeps bringing up this subject they know you don't agree on? And when you push back, they go, agree to disagree. And then they'll bring it up again. And it'll be the exact same argument, agree to disagree. And then they do it again. And it ends the same. And they do it again. And it ends the same. That's not agreeing to disagree. Agreeing to disagree. I don't like agreeing to disagree. But agreeing to disagree is we're not going to agree. We're going to agree to disagree. Meaning we're not going to talk about it anymore. Because if you bring it up again, now you're disagreeing to disagree again. And when it's the same person bringing it up and then going, agree to disagree, that's not respecting boundaries. And that's a simple thing. But that's just one of those things that it's wearing a person down, right? It's wearing a person down. You're wearing them down and you run away. And you're wearing them down and you run away. And you're wearing them down and you run away. Because what's not happening is the person who's constantly bringing it up and then going, agree to disagree, they're not acknowledging the other side. They just want to be right. And there's no give and take in the dialogue, right? Another big, so they do as I say, not as I do. That's a big sign, right? If someone has something that's super important to them, but they're not going, agree to disagree, don't bring it up, leave me alone. You know, if they want to be able to stop a conversation dead, but they won't let you do it, and they keep bringing something up even then when they know it bothers you, That's gaslighting. Okay. It is. Textbook. Exceptions apply in deeply emotional things when people need to heal. But if people aren't acknowledging that this is something that really bothers them and they keep bringing it up and they keep bringing it up and they dart away when you push back, that is gaslighting. Another thing is when people don't seem to care when something has hit you in a bad way. They don't have to agree that's the way it happened, but they do have to care that it upset you. And there are too many people that they find out someone's feelings are hurt and they just keep pounding away at the issue. That's the sign of a very real problem. Because people should be aware enough of someone being in distress that no simple disagreement is worth someone getting really hurt. That's when disagreement moves into bullying or abuse. When someone says, when you bother to go, look, this hit me the wrong way. Can you please slow down? And they don't. Or someone says, look, I don't like that word. Can you not use that anymore? And they don't honor that. That's the sign of a problem. Now, they might forget 2 weeks later and you have to remind them. It's the effort, right? It's the attempt that has to be there. Now, this involves communication. You can't get away with he ignored my nonverbal cues on this one, right? Like you got to step up and take the risk and say, can you not do that anymore? It's bothering me. But the nice thing about taking that risk, the nice thing about admitting that something isn't working for you, is it makes what happens next extremely clear. Because the person's either going to give a shit or they don't. And if they give a shit, great. If they were like, what? That wasn't what I intended to do at all, huh? If they stop dead in their tracks and go, what? Good sign. If they go, no, it's not, or they just keep going, or they're here's right, you're wrong, that's a big problem. That's a big problem. And I'm not talking about some rando on the internet, right? I'm talking about somebody you want to maintain a relationship with. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean they have ill intents. It could be that they're in a bad mental state, but that's not something you are required to deal with. That bad response is on them, not you. And too many people we're going on like, it started with Gen X, but we're cynical assholes. We're like, we were the last generation who are like, I really don't give a shit if this particular group of people like me, right? Because it was still like Cold War. We're all gonna die of nuclear bombs, right? Every generation after that, it's been more and more popularity makes you right. Go along to get along. Fitting in is like a life or death thing. And because it's been multiple generations of that, it's become normalized. It's become a really difficult cycle to break because the healthy social skills are seen by the third generation, gaslighted person as the exact opposite of what they are. But in order to build healthy community, in order to build healthy work environments, we have to start introducing those healthy social skills. Because the nice thing is that once someone has a productive conversation where they feel heard and validated and something actually gets solved, instead of just agree to disagree, there's a roadmap. Like once somebody does it once, they can do it again and do it again and do it again, easier and easier and easier. It becomes like emotional muscle memory. And it becomes easier for them to know the steps and the interpretation of language changes and all that good stuff. But you gotta get that first healthy conversation to get in that role, to get in that better headspace. And when everybody's walking around so messed up that they can't pay attention to what anyone else is thinking or feeling, it's very, very hard to get that first positive conversation down. And that's what makes that first positive conversation so important. So even if you need to take some extra time on that first one, it's worthwhile because it's a building block. It also gives you a sense of, like, if you spend 3 hours on someone talking to them and they don't appreciate it, and they're the same giant a-hole they were at the beginning of the conversation and still prone to flying off the handle and misinterpreting you, again, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time, right? So hopefully that helps. Gaslighting is not something we can solve in one video, right? I just wanted to bring this up because it seems to be all over the place right now. Anything that makes you start doubting not just your interpretation of things, but whether you are capable of discerning reality, that's a problem. Because if you don't have a serious diagnosed mental health condition, that means somebody's gaslighting you. Okay? Okay. I say this because I care. And you know what's coming now. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching and hang in there.